In the past few years, the Australian Tax Office has spent more than $400 million pursuing wealthy tax dodgers. It's led to 3,000 people, including stars like Paul Hogan, being audited and 20 being convicted. And yet the use of offshore tax havens by Australian corporations is still flourishing. As Greg Hoy reports, a majority of the top 100 companies on the Australian Stock Exchange use so-called secrecy jurisdictions abroad, leading to calls for a new crackdown.
We're allowing very many powerful companies to pay no tax whatsoever. I think it's a disgrace. It's an act of enormous political cowardice that our political leaders around the world haven't paid more attention to this issue.
This issue is the enduring popularity of tax havens or secrecy jurisdictions, often found on far-flung treasure islands such as the Caymans, Bahamas, British Virgin or Channel Islands, and tiny European principalities and dukedoms like Luxembourg or Liechtenstein. For a flat fee, most tax havens offer extremely low tax rates and high levels of secrecy to lure corporate capital seeking refuge from the taxman.
Some of it, clearly, there is tax evasion going on. That's where people are breaking the law. In other cases, there's tax avoidance, where people are using loopholes in the law to avoid paying their fair share of tax. Now, that might be legal, but it's completely unethical.
Of the top 100 companies listed on the ASX, 71 held subsidiaries in financial secrecy jurisdictions last year. These include Telstra, Westfield and News Corporation, to name a few.
When you look at Australian companies, you'll see that many of them are using tax havens.
Economist and accountant John Christensen worked for the government of Jersey in the Channel Islands for 11 years.
I'm trained as a forensic auditor, and what I found was tax evasion and tax avoidance on a colossal scale.
So he co-founded the Tax Justice Network.
Pinstripe, infrastructure, bankers, the lawyers and so on, are engaged in economic warfare. They're engaged in attacking democracy itself.
730 sought responses from 5 prominent companies. Telstra, which has many subsidiaries in such places as Jersey, Bermuda, the Cayman Islands and British Virgin Islands, simply didn't respond. Nor did Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation, which has around 150 subsidiaries in similar offshore places. Australia's largest listed property company, the Goodman Group, which also has subsidiaries in Jersey, the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg and elsewhere, said it uses subsidiaries in low-tax jurisdictions to provide a tax-neutral way for our Australian investors to invest in foreign countries. The Westfield Shopping Group said these structures are common in the global real estate industry, and both the Australian and UK tax authorities are aware of Westfield's organisation.
I kind of doubt that there is a lot of money offshore, held offshore by big Australian corporates.
Tax lawyer Graham Cooper is Professor of Tax Law at Sydney University and a senior consultant to the largest specialist tax advisory law firm in Australia, Greenwoods and Freehills. And he's a staunch critic of the Tax Justice Network and its supporters.
I don't want to be giving people the impression that Australian corporates don't use tax havens, but they don't leave money sitting in there. The money goes in, the money goes out. So if you ask, why do multinationals use tax havens? The answer is typically for convenience, not for tax.
Now, if companies want to argue that everything they're doing is completely legitimate and they have no concerns about it at all, then they should be quite willing to be transparent about exactly what each of those subsidiaries are for.
Dr Mark Zernzak is Director of the Justice Mission of the Uniting Church of Australia, one of those urging government to clamp down on rampant transfer pricing. Transfer pricing is when a company's subsidiary in a tax haven charges often exorbitant prices to its parent company back home, with the effect of greatly reducing its parent's tax bill.
We're talking very large sums of money and therefore very large amounts of tax revenue that countries and the rest of society and communities miss out on. And this has particularly a devastating impact on developing countries.
NGOs cite the example of global brewing giant SABMiller, which recently bought out Australia's Foster's Brewing Group and has extensive brewing interests in African nations like Ghana.
We started working with the assistance of a former senior tax investigator, and that investigation led us to tax havens in the Netherlands, in Switzerland, in Mauritius, where all the profits that are being made in Ghana are being siphoned off into tax havens to minimise the SABMiller's taxation bill.
SABMiller sent us a previous statement rejecting AusAid's allegations, suggesting it paid significant tax in countries like Ghana and honoured the OECD principles on transfer pricing, principles that AusAid would like to see reformed.
SABMiller have been very defensive. The company is paying no tax, next to no tax in a country like Ghana. We have never accused SABMiller of doing anything illegal. What we are saying is that what they are doing is immoral, and it comes from an ethically bankrupt organisation to be following this course of action.
Australia is trying to beef up its transfer pricing rules and is busy signing information exchange agreements with tax havens. Problem is, evidence of suspected wrongdoing must first be produced.
We need to move to automatic information exchange as the global standard. We're trying to push the Australian government to make this the global standard they push when they become president of the G20 in 2014. That is the best way of tackling tax evasion.
So will Australia answer the call to wage war on the Treasure Islands of tax when it takes over presidency of the G20 group of leading economies?
We will continue to work in all international fora that we participate and in all capacities to advocate the case for greater transparency. But in the end, you do need to bring other nations to the table to reach agreement on the terms under which you enter into your information exchange agreement.
So don't, it seems, hold your breath. Expect strong resistance to change from tax havens themselves and their many great admirers.
Greg Hoy reporting.